Hi, I'm Cindy Walter.
And I'm Janie Donaldson. Welcome to Quilt Central, where we celebrate quilting and everyday living.
We've got a great show planned for you today.
Taking care of your new and antique quilts is so important. And today, Mary Leahy will give us tips on pre-washing fabrics and washing antique quilts. She will show us how to dust off our old quilts, and Mary will also share her quilt journal with us. If you have a problem cutting multiple layers of fabric, you won't want to miss this, Dave's tool tip. He'll show us how he cuts 32 layers at once. Joice Drexler will show us a fun wall hanging using a theme fabric and an embroidery machine. And Beth Wheeler will show us how she makes her quilt labels. This is Quilt Central.
Quilt Central is made possible in part by Jacquard Products, committed to meeting the needs of artists. Joice America. Joice, because you simply love to sew. Fairfield Processing Corporation. We care for your quilts. A1 Quilting Machines. A1. Precision Quilting Machines. Olfa, the original rotary cutting system. Sulky of America, makers of decorative threads, stabilizers, books, and iron-on transfer pins. Welcome to Quilt Central, celebrating quilting and everyday living with your hosts Janie Donaldson, Cindy Walter, and David Martelli.
Our guest, Mary Leahy, is an expert on quilt care. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, because I'm sure you get a lot of questions on how to take care of your quilt.
We do. We get calls from consumers every day wondering about not only their new quilts, but antique quilts that they have, or quilts that they found in their grandmother's attic, and now they're trying to figure out how to take care of them.
Of course, right. Well, what would be the starting point? What's the first things you need to know about caring for your fabric?
Well, the starting point for our new quilts that we're making now is to pre-wash your fabric. Sometimes the problem with antique quilts is you don't know how those fabrics have been handled beforehand. So even if you say you're never going to wash it, someday someone's going to wash your quilts.
Right.
So it's good to take care of these things ahead of time. We developed this soap. It's a pearlized liquid soap, and we did this with textile conservators. It's very, very mild, but it's very concentrated. 1 teaspoon does a whole wash, so you get 48 washes per container, and the idea there is that you don't overdo it. You know, you don't need to be more aggressive than you need to be with your fabric. But there are 3 reasons for pre-washing. The first is shrinkage. And right on the board end of the fabric, it'll say may shrink 2 to 3%, but you know.
Yeah, they're all different, and boy, they can really shrink. That would really ruin a quilt if it was pieced in.
If you got everything pieced together and then you washed it and everything started to skew at different angles. So that's one reason. The second reason is color fastness. And sometimes you can get some dye runoff in the water, but it doesn't have the properties to adhere to another fabric. So what I do is I put a little white square of fabric in with my fabrics when I'm pre-washing them. And if that comes out white, I don't worry about it. Okay?
Good tip.
And the third reason is that you want to get the sizing off. The thing that makes it look so beautiful and pressed on the board in the store also resists the needle if you want a hand quilt.
You don't have to convince me of this, because I've taught hand quilting for such a long time, and that's number one. I tell students to pre-wash their fabric, because all of those sizings, it's impossible to needle some of the sizings, and you can just wash them out so easily if you did it ahead of time.
That's right.
And also some of the fusible webs won't stick to the sizings because they're a softener, so they're like an anti-cling.
That's right.
So some fusible webs won't stick to it either. So
that's
pre-washing,
right. And actually, that's a good thing about my next tip, which is, you know, people say they don't want to iron the fabric, that's why they don't want to pre-wash.
Yeah.
But in fact, if you wash your fabric and when you put it in the dryer, put it in with a dry hand towel. Not a bath towel this is like the perfect size. It absorbs the water quickly out of the fabric, so it dries very fast. And tends not to wrinkle, so that you can just fold it and then press it when you're ready to sew with it.
Well, and actually what I do is I take out just slightly damp and then fold it on pant hangers in my laundry room and let it dry completely with no
Okay.
wrinkle, because ironing is illegal, isn't it?
Yes, it is, I think, only when necessary.
Yeah, right.
The other thing you can do, but not if you're going to use a fusible, is put a fabric softener sheet in with it, and that also helps to release the wrinkles.
Okay.
Okay? So now when you get to actually washing your quilt, if you've done all this beforehand, when you wash your quilt, you use the same soap that you pre-washed your fabrics in. And then you don't have to worry that anything's going to happen to it.
Right.
And I put my quilts right in the washing machine on the gentle cycle, and I use tepid water, not cold, because you're using tepid water to pre-wash also.
Okay, perfect.
Okay? But if you have an antique quilt,
It's different.
let me show you this. This is a great way to wash an antique quilt. You put the quilt into a laundry basket and you submerge that in your bathtub, because the way we damage antique quilts is we try to lift them out of the water when they're still so heavy with all that water in them. It stresses the fabric.
This is a brilliant idea, because the quilt is too heavy to lift out of the bathtub. So you
Right.
put this whole thing in the bathtub and you're going to wash it in here.
Just gently agitate it with your hands,
Okay.
and then drain the tub, put the cool water in to rinse, do the same thing again, and this will rinse out completely. It won't leave any soapy residue.
Okay.
So you do that again, and then drain the water again, and then gently push the quilt against the side of the basket, and the water will drain right out through the front.
That's a brilliant idea,
So it's a
because
way of-
it's impossible to carry a big wet quilt through the house to get it out to dry.
That's right.
Right. And how do you dry yours?
Well, I put it on a sheet in the yard.
Me too, exactly. Yeah, on
But,
the grass. Yeah.
because I live in North Country where there are geese, I put a sheet over the top too. And
protective sheet.
A protective sheet. I learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah, that's good.
Another way to clean really delicate antique quilts is to use a screening method, and this is just sort of to get the dust off the quilt. Crazy quilts and quilts that you're not sure what they're made up of. You know, some of the old ones, they had
Wool and
wedding
silks and
gowns
all- yeah, right.
right. So you put this over the quilt, and you want to use a fiberglass screen, not aluminum.
Okay.
And you use the upholstery brush attachment,
Okay.
and you just go up and down like this, not back and
Perfect.
forth.
Just dusting it.
That's right.
And as we're moving this, I want to say, you had told me earlier, it's so important not to use regular detergents with your quilts, because they have all these extra chemicals that are too harsh.
Right. Your
Yeah.
fabric is not grass stained. You're just
Right.
trying to take care of those three issues.
Right.
So you don't want to use something on it that's actually going to start to affect the dye stuff if it's not
Right.
necessary.
And some of the chemicals are so strong they actually deteriorate the fabric. And like our towels, some they're lasting 5-10 years and it's all deteriorating. And
that's
yeah,
why.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
you're using something very strong on them.
Okay.
Okay, and it's really not necessary for your
Yeah.
quilts. Okay? This is acid-free tissue, and quilters, this is a great thing for quilters to use. And what they do is they open it up and you crunch it up and put it in the folds of your quilt, and it prevents creasing.
Great idea.
Okay? And you want to use acid-free because it won't yellow over time, it won't have any adverse effects with the fabric. And this is non-buffered, it's acid-free, and you can use it to store all kinds of things. They use it for all kinds of archival
Like
preservation.
photographs and paper?
Photographs and paper, scrapbookers use it too.
Oh, wonderful
You know,
idea.
wedding gowns, this is what they use in there.
Great idea.
Okay?
That's kind of hard to find sometimes, this
It
acid-free
is.
paper. I thought this was a great idea too.
Yeah, that's our gift and storage bag. It's 100% cotton. It's finished with a French seam inside, so you'd get no extra threads on your quilt, because you know how they tend to grow thread all on their own. It has a poly pocket on the front, and it's also lined with poly so that you can personalize that index card, write either the story of the quilt or who you made it for, just a little history of it. And that goes to also I forgot to mention, putting a label on your quilt.
Yeah, you have
It's
to,
so
right.
important. I have such beautiful antique quilts, and I don't know anything about them, and I
Right.
would love to at least have a name and a date.
I always have to use pillowcases where I live because it's very humid and you can't
Right.
use plastic. Oh
But they
my
have
gosh.
to be 100% cotton pillowcases.
That's right.
And those are harder to
And plus,
find
they're not
now.
even large enough. The pillowcases aren't
Right.
large enough. So this is a super
Yeah,
idea.
it's an oversized
And on the
bag.
back of that, it told us how to care for the quilt too. That's a great
Right.
idea.
So when you give the gift to someone, you're also telling them how to take care of it.
That's a great idea. Well, I thought this was beautiful.
And
Oh,
this
go
is-
ahead.
No, this is our quilt journal.
Okay.
And it's another way of keeping a history for yourself.
Now I have something like this, but it's an ugly spiral thing that's all bent up. And
Well, that's a thing of beauty too.
no, but this is much nicer. I'm going
Right.
to transfer all mine into this. This is so pretty.
And you can keep 60 photographs in here, so it's a lot of things. So I used like 2 pages for this quilt, and I put the second one on with the
Beautiful.
label on it.
And so are these all quilts you've made?
These are quilts that I've made.
Okay.
And I take pictures where, sometimes you say, I'm going to wait until I can set up a beautiful picture. My kids always kid me that all my quilts have feet because I make them hold them up so I can take pictures of them. I figure it's better to have the picture than to have a beautiful picture that I'll never get around to setting up. So.
That's a great idea. If you had a quilt that had a really bad stain, how would you care for it?
Well, there are a couple of things that you could do. You can try, you always go with the path of least resistance first. So I would try this first. If you have, with the acid-free tissue too, sometimes people stack their quilts in a beautiful cabinet like this, and they look great.
But the wood can stain this.
That's right.
So the secret is to prevent any stains getting on it, and that's right.
In the beginning, but if you need to go an extra step,
there are more types of washes.
this is another kind of a wash that you can use. It's really for staining.
Okay, so there's other types that you can get them out. Well, thanks for all these tips. And one more thing, would you take care of an antique quilt or a brand new quilt basically the same way? Start from the beginning. If it's new or old, always take care of your quilts, right?
That's right.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
That's right.
Email question of the day comes from Terry Lewis in Santa Clara, California. I cut multiple layers of fabric, and every time I cut my layers, they seem to be distorted. What's happening? Terry, when the pressure's on, you have to apply it in the right places. And remember, Terry, it's all about the tools. Distorted layers. Everybody does it. And we're going to show you how to make your layers not be distorted anymore. To do layers, you're simply going to say, we would never do more than 6 to 8, because once you do, you use uneven pressure on the rotary cutter, and your layers will start getting uneven. So we're going to count these layers. I'm going to show you how we do it, and I'm going to tell you why it works the way it does. There's 2 layers. There's 4 layers. There's 8 layers. There's 16 layers. There's 32 layers. This is not magic fabric. This is real fabric. And there's 32 layers. 32 layers of fabric. Now, because we're using even pressure on top of the blade, watch how easy this zips right through 32 layers of fabric. And if you notice, all 32 layers are perfectly even. It all has to do with even pressure on top of the blade. And remember, it's all about the tools.
If you'd like your quilting tool problem solved, send an email to Dave Martelli at toolschool@quiltcentraltv.com.
You probably recognize our guest, Joice Drexler. She's going to show us a darling wall hanging with apples. Hi, Joice.
It's always fun to be with you, Cindy.
Yeah.
And this is an embroidered wall hanging featuring some of the designs that I've done for the embroidery machine. And I thought it'd be fun to show the viewers how to set up for embroidery and how to just have a lot of fun making something for your wall that's seasonal.
And this project's gorgeous. So I'm
Thank
glad you brought that.
Thank you. Well, to first start off, I wanted to do something around this wonderful theme fabric. I love this Michael Miller. It's a watercolor design, and I just loved it. So I picked fabrics that kind of coordinated with that. And when you cut these fabrics, you're going to need the theme fabric is featured on the outside border, and they need to be cut 4 inches across the width of the fabric. And then you're going to have an inner border, which will be like an accent that'll bring your eye into it, and that is cut 1.5 inches.
Okay.
Then we cut a strip to cut a square out of, and this is the light green fabric, and it's 4 7/8.
Okay.
And from that, I cut squares that are also 4 7/8. That's just squaring it off, because what I want to do with that, Cindy, is I want to fold it to help me find the cut I want for the triangles. And you can just finger press that, or you can use an iron, whichever, but that will give you the exact cut that you need for the triangles. These triangles are always a little larger than what you need. Once you piece it on, it's going to be trimmed
Right,
after
square
it's
it up
pieced,
a little
squared
bit,
up.
right.
And then you're also going to
And
need...
let me back up, though. You're
Oh.
going to need how many of those?
Oh, well, we're going to need 4 for each of the designs that's featured, so that's 4 times 3, that's 12.
Okay, great.
Thanks for reminding me about that. Now, we also are going to cut a 6 3/8 inch square and a 12-inch square. And the reason that we need two sizes, Cindy, is because there are two sizes of triangles in the design. You're going to have smaller ones at the top, and the larger ones are featured along the side. And you do the same thing. You fold it and cut it into triangles. And as you can see, for the larger ones, you're going to need 4, and for the smaller ones, just 2. So you'll have 2 left over. Now I want to show you about doing the actual embroidery, because that is so important. We are just embroidering designs onto muslin, but you do that in a computerized embroidery machine. Now, if you didn't have an embroidery machine, maybe you might just want to put your apple print fabric in that area instead.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah. So I usually cut a muslin square or whatever fabric I'm going to do the embroidery on about 8 inches. All the designs in the embroidery card are made for a 4x4 hoop. And that's what this basically allows you to do an embroidery in. Now on the design card, as you can see, there's lots of different designs on there, but since we're using apples as a theme, I thought, well, I'll pick out the 3 apple designs that I have on there. But I did want to show you that there are a lot of different designs on there.
Oh, even birds. How beautiful.
Even birds, yeah.
My mom would like that one. That's beautiful.
I love birds and nature things, so most of my designs are geared on that. So that's my fruit card. Now to get this into your hoop, what I've done is taken a sticky stabilizer, and I like these because these are pre-cut into pieces that are 12 inches.
To fit your hoop.
Yeah, and if you have a smaller hoop, you can trim them down, but it does give you a nice size to work from, and they're all pre-cut for you. Now they have a release sheet on them, and what I like to do, Cindy, is I take a pin and I score an X. I have already positioned this inside the hoop. With a computer embroidery, there's an attachment to attach it to your machine, and then the machine bed moves around the way that the card is programmed to allow you to do that. Now,
So the paper side is
the
on
paper
top.
side is up because you have to remove this release sheet. And this is nice because this way you don't get any onto your hoop, and it makes it very stable for you while you're working on it. I should recommend to make sure you do that scoring with that pin so that you can get it out easily. But this allows you to have a sticky surface. And maybe you're doing something, Cindy, where you have a piece that's too small. Maybe you only have a piece of fabric that you want to embroider that's this small. Well, you could always just lay your fabric in there and smooth it out, and it would stick while you're doing your embroidery. So maybe you're doing a pocket and you already have a cutout from your pattern
Or
piece.
a collar.
Or a
Great
collar.
idea.
This is the way that you would do it. So that's how you would get your embroidery set up. And then, of course, you would just follow the directions on the card as to what 40-weight rayon embroidery threads you should use, what colors.
And I have to say, I've always been, I was not scared, but every time I go to embroider, I have to like think twice, but it's really not that hard.
Oh,
I
no,
mean,
it's
not
really,
that hard.
the machine's going to do it for you.
And you follow the
it's
directions.
so precise. I used to teach free motion embroidery, and I can tell you that people who don't know anything about embroidery can do this kind of embroidery. You do have to have a skill level to do the free motion work. We can move that now and talk about how you get your design fixed up for your wall hanging. Like I said, we have cut these smaller triangles from our light green fabric, and all we've done here is just positioned it and taken a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then pressed it back. And you would do that around all 4 sides so that you have your design actually centered, but in a nice way, because this is really going to be on point in the design, as you can see, and this really brings your eye to it. I think it makes it more interesting than making a square.
It's nicer on point. And let me ask you one more question. You had a bigger piece of cotton that you were working with your machine. Do you use a bigger piece and then trim it down to the 4 1/2?
You trim it down to the size that you need
center
for
the motif and trim it to
That's exactly right.
That's good.
Exactly right. And once you have all the ones that you are doing, and there are 3 different apple designs on there, you can just decide what order you might want them in. I think we've got this one at the bottom, and this one at the top.
Absolutely
but you could do
gorgeous.
it any way that you wanted.
This
and
thread is stunning. Is that a rayon?
That's a rayon 40 weight
Yeah.
embroidery thread because these machine embroideries are digitized for 40 weight rayon thread.
Wow.
That is what they're made for.
Absolutely gorgeous.
So do look for that. Now as you proceed, you've got your square. Now you want to put the bigger triangle in. Now as you can see, compared to this one that we have, let's just lay this out a little bit and lay this piece over so they can see how the piecing goes.
Oh,
As you can see, this is the big triangle, and this is the smaller triangle that we're pieced on. And this kind of gives you the positioning that you do. It's rows that you are doing, and you're simply lining them up and sewing them together. Now on this, you will also want to add your accent strips, and I always start at the bottom first, and then the top, and then the sides.
And one more little piece up here, final little row.
That's right, final little row. And then the fun part is the quilting part. Now we've layered our fabrics, of course, and we have used a rayon thread that's a 30 weight, it's a heavyweight rayon thread to do the quilting, to make the apples pop. And on here we've used
around the apples.
Around the apples, it just makes it pop up.
It looks like trapunto.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, what a great idea.
And then on here we have a 30 weight cotton, which is a heavier weight cotton thread. And it's great for doing this. And the way I got my quilting design on there was I traced it onto a water-soluble stabilizer.
That is a perfect idea.
And I like to
because you could trace anything, any picture of anywhere.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But why not keep it going with the theme of what you're doing? You know, so apple leaves.
Yeah, that's great. And I've told you before, but I love thread. So to have this heavier weight thread as part of the major direction. And of course, the major pattern, of course, you want to spray it to spray base all the layers together.
All the layers. And when I put this on too, Cindy, I'll spray and then layer it on.
Oh, it's good. Well, thank you, Joyce, for that great idea. What a beautiful project. I love the colors too. Beth Wheeler has joined us to show us some interesting quilt label ideas. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Cindy. I brought an adorable, colorful baby quilt with me today, and if you flip it over on the back, you'll see that there is a custom printed label on the back. It has the title of the quilt, the date that it was made, and the person it was made for. Quilters are very concerned about documenting their quilts now.
Especially we have a lot of antique ones that we don't even know who made them. Right.
So we're very concerned about the next generation of quilters, that they know where this generation of quilts came from, who made them, who they were made for, and why.
And so is it washable?
It is. It's completely washable.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful idea. So how did you make this exact label?
Well, I've used a specially treated inkjet fabric and combined artwork and some words on just a simple graphics program, whatever anyone has on their computer at home.
And I want to reiterate that it has to be a special paper because the inkjet, any of the inks from your printer will not be permanent on regular fabric because they can't adhere to cotton. So you need a permanent, you need the right type of paper so it'll
This is
adhere.
pre-treated with a special mordant to make it bond to the fabric.
Okay. And so here you have a program up that's a print shop or a publisher or something like that. Even a Word program you could probably use if you just want words. And so now you're going to print it.
I've printed it first on paper, so I can make sure the graphic is the size that I want, that the words fit well in the space provided, it has the right color, that sort of thing. And then once I have it just the way I want it on paper, then I print it on the fabric.
And you're actually free to make it any size you want. Like you can make it the whole page,
exactly.
or you can make 4 on a page or something.
If you wanted to make just a few words, you could print 4 on a page. If you wanted to make a larger label, maybe incorporate a photograph or something, it might take up the whole page.
Great idea if you were making it for your granddaughter to put your photo on it or something like that.
Or if
Wonderful
putting
idea.
her baby picture on the quilt label.
Super idea.
And when it comes out, then it just needs to dry a few moments. Once the ink is dry, we separate the fabric from the backing. There's a quick rinse step, and then it's ready to either piece into the backing or you can applique it onto the backing.
Super. I saw that you had another label started. What made you get to that point?
Well, I started with a fancy font and some edgy graphic, and then decided I didn't like it very well in the blue.
Right, it's not very legible, is it?
Right. So I went to a black font and a little different font style, and printed on the paper, and then when I was finished, on the fabric.
Well, thank you for all your wonderful tips. That was a great help.
My
I'm going to
pleasure.
make labels on all my quilts now. And I hope you enjoyed our show today. We'll see you next week.
Quilt around the clock. Visit the Quilt Central website at www.quiltcentraltv.com for more information on this program. Quilt Central is made possible in part by Jacquard Products, committed to meeting the needs of artists. Janome America, Janome, because you simply love to sew. Fairfield Processing Corporation, we care for your quilts. A1 Quilting Machines, A1, precision quilting machines. Olfa, the original rotary cutting system. Sulky of America, makers of decorative threads, stabilizers, books, and iron-on transfer pins. We are celebrating quilting in everyday living by offering you the new educational beginner kits. You may call toll-free 1-866-PADUCA or visit www.quiltcentraltv.com.